do that, I want to tell you a little story about how I became aware of domestic abuse, especially as it relates to those who are in the church. Back in 2010 or so, we had an amazing lady who came to Living Water who had a beautiful young daughter. She was a single mom, she was a professional, she had done a ton of hard work to make sure that she provided for she and her daughter. She had bought her own home and had actually paid for it. And in the midst of all of this, she met a wonderful guy online who lived in the Midwest. He kind of swept her off her feet. It was almost like a Cinderella story, and he was the knight in shining armor coming to rescue her. And she and her daughter moved away to the Midwest to be married to this man. The man also adopted the daughter. She had another child to this man, and they had what appeared to be a beautiful relationship. And I was out in the Midwest one day, and I got to spend the day with her family, and everything seemed to be fine. Well, a few years passed, and I got a telephone call one day, and it was from her father. Her father was asking me a bunch of questions about domestic abuse and how I would handle it. Her dad happened to be a pastor, and I just thought it was two pastors talking to one another, figuring out how do we help each other minister to people. And one of the things he said was, how would you counsel a woman who was in an abusive relationship, especially as it relates to not physical abuse where she's got black eyes or bruises on her arm or something like that, but where she has been verbally abused, where the fella has been putting her down and treating her poorly and things like that. And I said to the father, I said, I would do some pastoral counseling. I'd bring the two of them in together and try to work it out, and try to do just the standard stuff that I would do with really any relationship. And so we had a nice time talking. The dad hung up, and a few minutes later, the phone rang. And it was her brother, and her brother is a local pastor who's a friend of mine. And he said, "Hey, Mike, I want to tell you why my dad called you. It was actually a test. My dad wanted to see how you would minister to my sister, because my sister's moving back home, and she's coming back with her husband and her two kids, but her husband is verbally abusive to her. And I got to tell you, Mike, you actually failed the test." And that was shocking to me. I thought I had done it, I thought I was giving the dad really good advice, and here it turns out I wasn't giving him good advice, but I didn't know that. And so the dad did something for me. He sent me a book in the mail called Why Does He Do That? It's written by a secular psychologist, counselor who ministers to men who have been in abusive situations, who have been abusive. And that book sat on the table in my office for about 6 months. And one day my wife walked into my office, and she was looking around. My wife's a rabid reader, if that's the right term. And she said, "Hey, Mike, can I read this book?" And so I said, "Yeah, this lady's dad had sent it to me, and I hadn't read it." And so Kathy, my wife, took the book and she read it. And a couple days later, she came into my office and she says, "Mike, you will not believe what's in this book." And this book helps explain the relationship of another couple in our church. You see, there was a family in our church who my wife and I were deeply involved with, who we loved very, very much, and who was always struggling in their marriage. And Kathy and I would get called to their home on occasion to try to help them out. And we never knew what was going on in the relationship. He would say one thing, she would say another thing. We'd get back in the car, drive home, and Kathy and I would be like, "What in the world just happened? We don't know who's telling us the truth, because the guy says it's green, the wife says it's blue, and we just could not figure it out." And she says to me, "Mike, what's happening is this man is verbally abusing his wife." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "You need to read this book." And so I read the book, and my eyes were opened to just the prevalence of abuse that's actually in our society and what's actually in our church. And over the course of the next year, we engaged with this couple, and I tried to help my friend understand that he was an abuser, and my friend wouldn't have any of that. Subsequently, a bunch of stuff just kind of went south. We tried to help him, and it didn't work out. He ultimately walked out of my relationship and his relationship with my wife and I tell you all of this because it's put me on a trajectory to try to learn more about domestic